By the end of this, you are going to know so much more about the Vikings run game than your friends do. Let's lock in and level up.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, where we're always trying to learn something new. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day each and every day. I appreciate you all so very much and all of your dedication. You're getting rewarded for it now because this is maybe going to be the most informative part of this extremely informative, just information-dense series that we got going here this week on Locked On Vikings. So thank you so much for showing up. And thank you so much if you are new here as well. You can find Locked On Vikings wherever you find your favorite shows. Just search it out, as well as YouTube and Amazon Fire and Roku if you download the Locked On Minnesota Sports app. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. This summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or bonus daily. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. So today is probably Wednesday, I think is the order I'm doing these in. And that means that we're doing the run game today. This is part of a longer series we're doing all week on the Vikings playbook, constructing a Vikings playbook from the ground up. We know that it is heavily influenced by the Dolphins, 49ers, and Rams playbooks. You know, McVay, Shanahan, McDaniel, probably some LaFleur in there too, though that's not something I have as much access to as the other three. So the goal here is going to be to understand the ins and outs of a modern run game. Beyond just being able to identify that one was power, that one was outside zone, and, you do a usage chart or whatever you're going to see from like a fantasy website. But rather to understand the components of what goes into a run game and what all the words in the play call mean. Plus, just like strategically, like we're going to kind of pretend we're the OC a little bit. We're going to pretend we're Kevin O'Connell or Mike McDaniel or the play caller and kind of understand the ideas behind all of these things and how you would sequence them together. And then at the end, we're going to fold it in with all the motion stuff that we did on Monday. So go listen to that one as well if you're interested in like how these teams use motion, how they tag it, how they communicate it to everybody. We went very, very in depth on motion on Monday. Okay, so I guess the best place to start here is with the different types of run blocks. Now, personally, I practically, the types of run blocks that you're going to see can, I think, be broken down into like four categories. You've got reach blocks, where you're trying to get out in front of a guy, play side, and then turn around and seal him off. By the way, play side, backside are going to be two terms that I use a lot here, like pretty quickly. So you're going to want to be familiar with that. Play side is just the side that the run is going to, and backside is the side away from where the run is going to. After reach blocks, that's what you're going to see a lot on outside zone. You'll also see a lot of, drive block is like the simplest block, right? That's where you take a guy, move him, just sled him down, right? You'll see that at the goal line. You'll see drive blocking and the tush push. You're not going to do a lot of reach blocking on QB sneaks. You'll also have down blocks, which are blocks to the backside. So you take a 45-degree step to the backside. So if it's a run to the left, you're stepping to the right. And then you try to drive that person kind of away from the play. And then you'll have combo blocks, double team blocks, which are going to be the main ingredient here in zone running, which is where most of these offenses, I guess I have to say now, we'll get to that, exist. So they'll label these in a lot more detail than that, right? That's just physically what happens. But really what I'm talking about is your instruction as an offensive lineman for who you are supposed to block and how you are supposed to block them. So what I'm going to do is use a simpler terminology than what you'll see in an NFL playbook. And I'll just say, look, if the center and guard are doubling together, it's a cage block. Get it? CG, cage. And I'll just say play side cage or backside cage to tell you which guard is blocking with the center. And then it's a gate block if it's the guard and the tackle. You get me? A tat block if you've got the tackle and the tight end. We'll call it tat. In more modern playbooks, you'll see something like single, double, triple if it's play side, and it'll just like go on the gap. So a center and guard play side would be a single, and then the guard and tackle would be a double, and so on. And then like ABC, and you just kind of are like labeling it the same as you'd label that gap between those two linemen. And so you have like an A block on the backside and a double block on the front side. And that's going to be, I get why they do that because it differentiates better, but I think we can afford to keep it simple because we're not NFL offensive coordinators and we can just go with cage, gate, and tat. Okay. So those are double teams. Then which people are double teaming on who is determined by a rule set and the defensive front. But you can think of it for now as basically just get who is in front of you. This is the way that you'll hear, high school, especially like JV or like youth coaches will teach it. Like when you're teaching it to somebody for the first time is gap down backer, right? Who is in your gap? On outside zone, your gap is to the play side. If there's a guy to your play side, you block him. If there isn't, you go down and block to the backside. If there's neither, or if you get, later into the play and then you look into a backer, right? So gap, down, backer. And that's going to essentially be the rule set for a lot of these. That's a simple way to understand it. But there's then a whole bunch of subversions on that, like general rule set. So here's how NFL teams actually delineate this. First off, every play call will have a linebacker associated with it. So for example, take a play call like force. Force has the fullback lead blocking. Also, get it? Force with an F, and he's forcing the lead block. Like, it's intuitive, right? And so he is lead blocking. Every time you hear force, that is a Mike linebacker run. So that means that how you figure out which linebacker and which lineman you are responsible for means you start with the Mike linebacker and you count out. So if you are, say, the backside, force is always going to be a strong side run. So let's say that you're the weak side tackle. And you're going to be responsible for the will linebacker. And that means you're going to look at whoever the Mike is and get the guy next to him. Just get the guy to the weak side of him. And that's going to be the linebacker that you're doubling up to. And then you've got to figure out your lineman based on like gap down backers sort of rule sets. But who's the Mike, right? What if somebody is walked up? What if the Mike is over the A gap? What if they switch people? What if that's a safety? Who's supposed to be the Mike can get a little bit muddy. And so it's the center's job to just say it's that guy. And so when you see before a play, when you see the center pointing out a linebacker, that's what he's doing. He's saying that guy is the Mike. Everybody figure out your blocks based off, start at that guy and count out. Or he'll point out the will if it's a will run or whatever. So that's part of what you see them doing. By the way, on pass plays for pass protection, the center does a very similar thing and the rules work a similar way. So don't worry, it's not a tell. You'll basically see that every play, no matter if it's run or pass. And then everybody can kind of figure out what they're supposed to do. So if you're gate blocking with the guard and the tackle, you're that backside tackle, and you're gate blocking, so you're doubling with the guard, and there's a 3-tech right in front of you. You double to him, you go get the will because you counted it out the way the center told you to, and there you go. You've done your double team, and if everybody does that correctly, you should have a good chance of that run being good. So then that's your kind of your base idea. So we've just essentially gone over the default state of affairs. And if you wanted to make the simplest play call in the playbook, you probably could do that now and understand what everybody's supposed to do. If you heard the simplest play call and looked at every lineman, you could probably accurately predict what they were supposed to do. But we don't really do simple in the NFL as much as maybe even we should. Things get a little more complicated. You've got other kinds of double teams that aren't just your classic combo block like gate or cage. So these playbooks have like 25 other kinds, and I'm not going to tell you all of them because then it just becomes a memorization game, but I'll tell you what they kind of are like. So for example, fan. So let's say that there's an overhang defender. Overhang defenders are a big problem for these zone run schemes, and they're very popular right now because these zone run schemes are everywhere. Think Josh Metellus, right? Lining up next to the edge rusher and essentially getting ready to be like a second guy coming off the edge and causing a bunch of problems for the offense. So if there's an overhang defender, you will make a fan call, and sometimes you'll even have like a tackle who's supposed to recognize this, and he'll tap his hip, and then the guard next to him sees that, and okay, we're in fan now. That like if you see tackles like kind of tapping their hip or doing some kind of signal to each other, that's the sort of stuff that they're communicating. So you'll have a fan block, which means that just block the guy to the outside. It's essentially the tackle telling the guard, hey, I got to get this overhang defender, which means this edge rusher next to him is going to be unblocked, and he is now your job. You got to come get him. And if that gets miscommunicated, somebody's going to come in unblocked, and that's how those sorts of plays will happen. And defenses are going to try to move everybody around or have late overhang defenders come in to stress that communication, right? You get this cat and mouse game. Or money. So that's going to be a backside man-to-man call, right? Man, money, get it? And again, it's sort of blocked to your outside. You'll see this on like duo runs, or these playbooks will call that like punch or jab, which makes a lot of sense, right? Punch and jab, it makes sense that those are a pair. Those are two very similar things. And it's duo, you're punching them, right? It's a very straight up and down run. There are other adjustments. For example, Oscar. Oscar is a term that flips the play. Now, I think this word changes every year, and the playbook that I'm working with is a little older. So I think... I wonder if I could figure out what this word is, because it's an at-the-line call. You'll hear it audibly. And I think it was water last year. I think water flips the play. That's going to be my guess, because you heard that a lot. So you hear water, and it flips the play. It only works if you're if you're in an identical formation, because there's no motion with it. It's not like when you click the trigger in Madden and everybody flips around. No, you're already in a formation that is symmetrical, and you're just changing the direction everything's going. You say Oscar. I guess for the Vikings, it was water. And that's different from can. Can is when you call like a backup play. You'll say, okay, here's the play, can to, play number 2, and then it's the quarterback's job to go, play number 1's not going to work. We got to can this, can. You'll hear that with like screens a lot. Or you'll can to a screen if you see a specific thing and you say like, a screen would really work here because of the way the defense is aligned. Okay, can, let's run a screen. Words like that are everywhere. And again, I'm not going to go over every single different kind of block with you. Instead, let's go over some of the actual run plays that you'll see, more stuff like force or whatever, and you can sort of start to get a sense for the system. But now you have the components. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by Gametime, the best place to find last-minute tickets to anything, whether it's a Twins game or a Lynx game, or a concert, or a theater production, or a comedy show, or whatever it is. You can find it at Gametime. You can find last-minute deals where you save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and flash deals and zone deals, which are absolutely amazing. They'll like be super flashy letters at the top of the app. You can't miss them. And that's where you're going to find like the real insane savings. Everything is up front for you. You can look at your seat view, a panoramic of your seat view. Make sure you're good with that. You can click on all-in pricing, so you know there's no hidden fees. Gametime is being 100% honest with you, which for a ticket dealer is everything. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Thanks so much for hanging out here and making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day every single day. When you're done here, you want some more traditional and classic Minnesota sports talk, go check out Locked On Minnesota Sports. You can talk about all the new rookies for the Wild and the Wolves, talk about the Lynx, whatever's going on with the Gophers at any given time, and of course some Vikings talk as well, roundtables, all that stuff. Go check that out. Moving on here with this sort of run game rundown on the Minnesota Vikings playbook. So let's talk about how they label their actual run plays. So these offenses label it numerically. So even is to the right and odd is to the left. I like to think of that as, I think something out of left field is very odd. That's my memory technique. So 18, for example, is outside toss. So 18 and 19 are outside toss. So if you see 18, that's outside zone toss to the right, and 19 is outside zone toss to the left. 14 and 15 are inside zone, so to the right and left, respectively, and so on. 12 and 13 and 14 and 16 and 17 are different kinds of power. There's like counter and stuff. So those are the like numerical ways of just getting, okay, this is the family of run play that we are in. But if we're running outside zone toss, which is where I'm going to live in most of this because I think it's the most distinctive one. So outside zone toss, right? If we're going to live in that family, there's a whole bunch of different ways that can manifest itself, right? You could have a cage block. You could have a gate block. You could have a backside gate and a front side cage, or the other way around. And what's the tight end doing? And what's the fullback doing? What are all these things, right? So we have more specificity we have to do, but there is a sort of a default state of affairs that and rule set, this gap down backer basically, rule set that tells you what to do unless you are instructed otherwise. But if we just live in that all day, it gets too simple and defenses can crack the code. So now we add extra wrinkles and ways to sort of solve the typical problems, the typical counters that defenses have come up with for these like staple runs. Now, that doesn't mean you always have to run something with the fancy schmancy, right? You can always just call the vanilla inside zone or whatever. It's a great way to start a drive, for example. But you're going to have a lot of other, we'll say, ingredients you can add to the stew, right? But for simplicity's sake, let's just like take stock real quick because we can actually make a play call now. We know all the words we need. If you go from Monday's show with the motions to today, you can say, let's say, 21 left weak, or let's even say fly to 21 left weak. So you have a fly motion coming into 21 left weak. Now everybody knows where they're supposed to go. That's the motion and the formation. And then you can say 19. And that's going to be a toss to the left from 21 left fly weak. So you're going to have an outside zone, strong toss. You're going to have the F on the weak side, hoping you get a linebacker over there. And then we're going to toss to him, and we're also going to do some fly motion to see if we can't get somebody else running the wrong way against the green of that play. And that fly motion, maybe we'll say it's spirit, so that we can get somebody running to the right while we do the toss to the left. There we go. We did a play call. That's the whole play call. Everybody would know what to do if you like got on the mic and you said that to one of these teams. I mean, we've made up our own words, of course, right? But like there we go. We're missing no components. But let's add some extra layers of complexity now. So there are other, I'll call them like variants, but they're basically other words you can kind of throw in that tell mainly skill players what to do. Sometimes tackles and stuff get into this, but whatever it is, it's like a specific variant on this. And later in the show, we're actually going to go over sort of a family of these, which is Zoro, Zelda, and Wheezy. Zora, Zelda, and Wheezy, and you notice they all have a Z in them because you want people's brains to relate them all together and kind of hear the same idea. And, Wheezy's going to have something going on the weak side, and Zoro and Zelda, you'll see what I mean. So keep those words in mind. But in terms of the frequency of these play calls, so we're still talking about outside zone, but what if you wanted to live in gap, but still be in this same system, this same communicative, like this same language essentially, and speak it? But what if you have a lot stronger linemen and maybe you've got a team like the Lions. Lions love gap runs. And this is what the Rams actually did last year. So the way I'm talking about it, all this motion into zone runs with a fullback and all that, very 49ers, very Dolphins, right? Shanahan and McDaniel, you've got Juszczyk, you've got Alec Ingold. The Rams have gone a totally different way, and McVay has gone a totally different way. And in fact, last year was the first time I think ever for McVay as a play caller that they ran more gap than they did zone. So that's gap is power and counter and trap and wham. That's stuff with pullers is the way that I like to think of gap. And duo, which is the same blocking rules more or less, but there are no pullers. I should also mention that between 2022 and 2023, the Vikings ran more gap than zone. Like their gap ratio increased, and that might have been an attempt to kind of fix what was a lackluster run game in 2022, still a lackluster run game in 2023, but changing with those ratios might be one of their attempts to solve that problem. So that's something to keep an eye on is will they suddenly be like a power team? Maybe they want more pullers or more duo or whatever, depending on what they feel they have, or are they going to lean further and further into the Shanahan-McDaniel side of things where they do motion and zones and a little bit more finesse and try to use the speed that you have with Jefferson and Addison and all that to try to stretch the defense horizontally before running right into their teeth. All stuff to maybe keep an eye on. Now, most of these will do a zone-duo mix. Duo is a good subversion on zone because against zone, one of the things that defenses will like to do because everything's moving super laterally is they'll start moving laterally. Duo is very straight up and down, and it's a lot easier to displace someone vertically if they're overplaying the zone. So if they start to overplay the zone, duo becomes the punish to that, and then it works kind of vice versa. So those two go together like peanut butter and jelly. And in the charting that I used for that stat, which came from PFF, duo is a gap run, which is appropriate, but it's like different. It kind of zone and duo are kind of a family. And then if you want to be like a power counter team, that's a different thing because for power and counter, everybody's down blocking. So you still have the same double team rules where what's my gap, what's my down, but it flips. So my gap is down first. And then my play side gap goes second. So it's almost like down gap backer, maybe is a better way to look at it. But you'll still, combo up to a linebacker if you see that you have to do that. And then that usually will leave somebody play side unblocked because everybody's going down, and that's who the puller gets, more or less. But what about duo itself? Like I said, punch and jab. So punch sets to the will linebacker. So if you hear punch in the huddle and then the center says 58, that's telling you that 58 is the will, and now you figure out who you're supposed to get from there. And jab sets it to the Mike linebacker. And that's the memorization that you have to do. And ultimately, that memorization, even at scale, is a lot more doable than when you first open up the PDF of a big playbook that's 450 pages long and you go, oh my God, how do I memorize all this? You memorize these little rule sets, right? And understand the systems, and then over days and days and days and days of practice, these systems become second nature. It becomes a language that you can fluently speak. I could probably do a whole episode on its own on duo and the techniques required to run duo, staying square with your shoulders, the way you have to fire your feet. You could basically just spend a bunch of time scrolling Jim McNally's Twitter and learn probably more again than 99% of your friends. If you just spent a day doing that, you could run circles around them at the bar if you wanted to. And maybe I will do that someday, but I do want to make sure that I'm getting to the Zorro, Zelda, Wanda thing. And it's kind of an example for how this stuff will adjust itself from the base play call that we're talking about. So we're going to get into those next. Continuing on with this Locked On Vikings playbook extravaganza episode, let's talk about some of these other variants that get kind of tagged onto these plays. So you'll hear 19 force. Well, you heard 19, so we're talking about an outside zone toss to the left, which tells most of the people what to do once you've got your formation and your motion in it. Most people should understand what to do. Force tells the fullback that he is going to lead block. And if that changes who you're supposed to block, that might change what linebacker you have or something, and you'll just kind of internally know that that's the rule, that when, hey, force means that linebacker is accounted for, which means I got to kick over to this guy, and so on and so forth. That's the stuff you talk about in meetings. Here's an example of that. So sift. So sift has an F in it, so it has to do with the F, the fullback. And it tells the F to block backside. It turns into kind of split zone, basically. So sift is actually an instruction for the backside tackle. The backside tackle, who usually will be blocking an edge rusher, right? Instead of doing that, you now protect your play side B gap, and you let that tackle go. You usually would do what's called a hinge block, which I guess is a fifth kind of block that you would see. It's more pass protecty, right? Where you get a little bit of depth, you let that guy, you just got to make sure that guy isn't going to chase down the play from the backside, so you do a hinge block. And missing that block it's a kind of a chill job because it's the backside guy. If he gets past you and makes the play, he's Michael Parsons, right? So most of the time you won't have to worry about that. Now in the NFL, there's a lot of guys that can make that play, so you have to be a little bit more on it. But I digress. So sift is telling you to not do that anymore. Instead, protect the B gap. And the fullback hears sift and knows that the tackle is no longer blocking the edge rusher, and that means I got him. So it's kind of one word that gives an instruction to two players. And again, when we're trying to get play calls in the huddle that aren't 20 words long, which is sort of the challenge that we talked about at length on Monday, is that, these play calls are left clamp, toss, 19, structure, sift, right? But each one of those words is an instruction for one particular person, right? If you're the guard, you didn't have to listen to all those words necessarily. So there's that much less of an opportunity for you to fail. But sift told the backside tackle to block his B gap, and for the fullback to come in and get that edge rusher. And now whatever happens on the front side is that much freer to do it, right? So that's the kind of stuff we're talking about. So the important one to know, and if you are to understand any of these plays, it's the Zorro family of them, which I am calling Zorro, Zelda, and Wheezy. So Zorro is a very, very important one. This is a staple for the 49ers. This is how Christian McCaffrey is winning rushing titles and making all pros, is with Zorro. This is what makes Kyle Juszczyk so good. This is a big George Kittle one too, because it has to do with the fullback and the tight end. So Zorro takes two skills and doubles the front side edge with them. This is the key thing to understand, is that tight end and that fullback double the front side edge. That front side edge is very often the best player on the defense. How many teams are, you're walking in and Joey Bosa is the guy that you are preparing for, or say Danielle Hunter when it was the Vikings. That guy is spooky as heck, and we got skill players on him, right? So the way that we do this is essentially you tell the tight end, who's usually going to be on the strong side there, or sometimes he'll be motioning in there, so you'll actually do like fly motion to it. Or you'll have the tight end, if he's on the strong side, you'll have him like do a bounce motion where he'll go over to the weak side, then come back, right? So you can see how you start to concoct what your play call would be with Zorro, right? Maybe you add like Delta or Spirit, which are two of the fly motions, left and right, get it? Then we talked about that system on Monday as well. But whatever it is, maybe you give him a run start or maybe you just trust him. He is supposed to take the inside shoulder of that edge rusher and win it, right? Just win half the man. You don't have to block the guy. Just take his inside shoulder and he can go as upfield of you as he wants if that's what he wants to try to do. But otherwise, we're going to start to widen him out. We're going to kick him out. That's what you need the tight end to do. It's a pretty bad mismatch, so the F is going to come in to help. The F is going to help on the inside hip, which is why, you're telling that tight end, you're trying to seal him. And if you seal him and that edge does, even if he's beating you to the outside, we're going to run to the inside gap so he can penetrate the D gap as much as he wants. We're not going to be in it. And so if that is sealed off properly, the F will just run up through and he's a lead blocker, but he's helping the inside hip. So let's say that edge rusher, because he's so good, he does beat you to the inside. Now the F will come and hit him on that inside hip and you've got a second chance to seal him. So you kind of get two chances to win this mismatch, and that'll really help make that mismatch less terrifying. And it means everybody else gets their own mismatches, right? Because now all your offensive linemen don't have to contend with maybe the best player on the team. So it's a way to kind of try to do that. Now, this worked phenomenally. This has been a staple thing in a whole bunch of these offenses now. So that's what Zorro does. So a play call would be, 21 left weak, fly to 21 left weak, and then you'd say 19 Zorro. So that's an outside zone toss with Zorro happening on the play side there. If you're with me so far, then congratulations. You have already well surpassed most of your buddies at the sports bar, and you're going to be able to absolutely dunk on them if that is something that you're into. So let's talk about now Zelda, which is the exact same, but it is the center declares the weak side linebacker instead of the Mike linebacker. So remember, that's who we're all counting out from. So if we move the declared linebacker from the Mike, if we were in Zorro, and sometimes you'll even can this. So your play call will be 19 Zorro can 19 Zelda. That means that everybody's blocking assignments kind of shift one over to the weak side because they're all counting from one linebacker over, right? So everybody's blocking a little bit more to the weak side. So why would you necessarily do that? Well, what if there's an overhang defender on the weak side that you're afraid of, right? What if Josh Metellus lines up weak side as an overhang defender and he's not blocked? You got to say Zelda. And now that means that tackle is going to do that fan call thing, and he's going to do all that stuff we talked about earlier, and everybody's going to shift things over to sort of make up that space. You've still got your double on the front side, and you're going to run it like this. That is the point of Zorro being paired with Zelda. And we got these fictional like hero type, fantasy hero types, and it starts with a Z. It's like very easy to put those two words in your mind together. And then Wheezy is going to be the same blocking scheme more or less, and you will construct a game plan. This is very important. If you're constructing a game plan with this, you will plan to call the same motions with Zorro and Zelda that you will with Wheezy. You want the defense to think that you're going to do Zorro and Zelda, and then the running back runs to the weak side instead. So you do that bouncy motion. Let's say you've gotten them with Zorro 3 times. You've gotten good runs on that. Now they're starting to key on it and they're starting to overplay it. Then you do Wheezy. That guy runs with the motion and then you run the ball the other way. And Wheezy so Zorro and Zelda are strong side runs. They're always going to be strong side runs. They're always going to go to where the tight end is or where he'll be by the snap if there's motion. And Wheezy is a weak side run, hence why it's Wheezy. So I hope that part makes sense for you. So let's put all this together and examine for real how motion will affect a run. So let's do that play call we've been talking about. So let's say Y delta to 21 weak. So delta, if you listen on Monday, you know that delta is fly motion from the right to the left because we got an L in delta. So from the right to the left, the tight end is going to come in, and now the strong side will be set on the left. Weak tells the F, to the fullback, to CJ Ham, that he's supposed to be on the right side. And there's our formation, right? And also weak all the wide receivers know where they're supposed to be in week and all that. And then you'll say 19 Zoro Can Zelda. So ride Delta to 21 week, 19 Zoro Can Zelda. You would tell the quarterback that. He would go relay it in the huddle. You'd have your play. He would look to see if there's anything really scary on the weak side. He'll maybe can to Zelda. He's going to go, nah, weak side looks fine. Let's run it. Wide 80 set hut, and you're going to do your run play. You get it. That's it. I mean, there's a whole bunch of other versions. There's a bunch of other Zoros and Zeldas out there. But again, that would just become a memory game. There's sideline and there's support that gets the wide receivers involved and all that. Those are all other words that are like occupy the same spot in the system. And that's really what I want you to understand is the system itself. If you understand the system itself, adding new words and new ingredients that you can put into the stew is not going to be nearly as complicated or daunting as it is in the first place, and you can understand this system. So if you have that, congratulations, you know run games better than basically anybody in the fan world will. So if you followed me here, congratulations. Even if you didn't get all of it and you just understood a little bit of it, hopefully you still came away with something. Thank you so much for listening. We're going to do pass games tomorrow and Friday, and as always, Skull.